How's everyone doing? I'm Swapnil. I work at Nethermind, and I also work at the switchboard team at Nethermind, which is focused on pre-confirmations, base rollups, execution tickets, proposed election mechanisms, everything that kind of brings the best UX to Ethereum. And right now, it seems to be the research is focused around pre-confirmations, but we're also looking at other topics around proposed election mechanisms. So I'm here to ask you, do you trust your validator? I mean, we make the Ethereum protocol, all of us, and then we entrust Ethereum validators to trust our protocol, run our protocol. So clearly we have some amount of trust in them. And I'll extend this question into how much trust we have and how far can this trust get us? So a bit of intro. How does the block supply chain look like currently? Stolen this from like Barnaby's article, and I didn't tag him, sorry. But in the current structure, we have users, not enough of them. Searchers, quite a bit of them. Builders, not enough of them. Bunch of relays. Then the MEF boost binary that the validator runs next to them chooses a bunch of relays, which block to build or which block to propose. And then the local client proceeds on to participate in consensus, the block that is built by the builder or searchers. Cool. So the things to notice here is that we basically have a big nodes versus small node dynamic. The small nodes are the ones that are currently in protocol, the ones in the green. And the big nodes are the ones that are currently in yellow, the big nodes. So they're doing searching strategies, they're doing highest like MEV revenue stuff. They're also entrusted, even though they are out of protocol, they're also entrusted inherently because they're doing in-protocol things to offer us censorship resistance. And we have Titan here, clap for them, thank you. But a lot of them don't. And this is not the equilibrium that we want. The equilibrium that we want is just like back in 2015 kind of Ethereum. You don't have to think about your app doesn't have to be designed around these increasingly complex topics of MEV and pre-confirmations and so on and so forth. But we do want the UX that they offer us to us. So how can we change the power dynamic that currently exists, which is big nodes enforcing sort of their will on the small nodes? We'll come back to that later. But what negative externalities do we currently see from the big nodes? We have like basically a monopoly or oligopoly, something like that, where 3 builders are building most of the blocks. Doesn't feel very decentralized. They also have unchecked control on block building. We also have multi-block MEV. It's probably harder to see like in the flesh right now because we don't see it in the arbitrage cases. But we probably do have optimistic multi-block MEV, and I think the builders here, if you get them drunk enough, will tell you how they do it. And how do big nodes get away with all of this stuff? The big nodes usually get away with this because they're out of protocol. We can't enforce any behavior on them because then the protocol doesn't even recognize them. For the protocol, it's just they don't even exist. So that's the problem that we're addressing right now with many EIPs. And I would propose one step further that we go to fix this problem. And also, not all the negative behavior they do is objective. For example, censorship is not objective. You cannot make a ZK proof. You can't make a very good ZK proof or an objective ZK proof that proves that someone is censoring. We have latency delays, network propagation delays, all those things just make it impossible for us to objectively say that this is objectively bad behavior. So there's no way to enforce a mechanism or design, like make a design that enforces them to be censorship resistant. There's designs like inclusion lists that enforce them to include things that are being not included right now. But ideally, we wouldn't need this, and ideally, we could just enforce, the validators can enforce censorship resistance in the MEF boost auction. They can say like, hey, give me the highest bid, but also be censorship resistant. Please include like OFAC transactions as well. But the bidding dynamic is not such right now. Also, if we do try to do something like this, it's quite complex on what the bidding strategies for the builders will be. So there's probably some easier ways around this. Again, I'll get back to that later in the slides. Cool, so we have this dynamic where big nodes are doing all of this malicious stuff, and small nodes, these Raspberry Pis, are keeping up the global settlement layer. They also give us, some of the signs are weird on the slide, but they also give us geographic decentralization. They're robust, there's 1 million of them, which is quite nice. And they also are kind enough to follow different implementations. There's 5 different implementations for the EL clients, and I think 5 different ones for the CL clients as well. And even though the best strategy for the validator is to maybe choose the most dominant one, the most performant one, validators are still being generous enough to choose different implementations and make trade-offs to make Ethereum better. We probably don't see this behavior in the builder world. They're probably all using very similar stacks. And if there's a bug in one of them, then there's a probably bug in all of them. And if one day one goes down, then all of it goes down, and we go back to like 2015 days of Ethereum, but also now we're not used to that UX. So that probably won't be the base outcome either. In general, it's easy to see that the small nodes are being quite responsible by being nice. We wish that we can enforce this behavior on the big nodes as well. Cool. So the first step of enforcing behavior on big nodes is bringing them in protocol. There's many proposals for this: EPBS, execution tickets, execution auctions. They require the big nodes to stake or bond in protocol some ETH. And if you can find some infractions that you can maybe even slash this ETH, which is the case in the current EPBS discussion, as I understand. Execution tickets, similar thing where they have to like at least put some bid down, it get burned, and you can like change just the way the builders are selected based on if they're being bad. You can like decrease the probability of being selected, i.e. they make less future rewards and so on and so forth. And I think probably similar things can be done for execution auctions. And since they're now in protocol, we can hold them accountable for objective faults. For example, with EPBS, there's a PTC committee that checks the timeliness of the payload release. And yeah, even though it's a bit of subjective behavior, we kind of try to turn it objective by forming a committee around it. We try to like, make it a bit more countable. But we still have this problem that censorship resistance or many other things to come in the future are still subjective, and we can't enforce that behavior on the big nodes. We can't punish builders for being malicious by doing malicious ordering of public transactions. In the pre-conf case, gateways can't be punished for delaying pre-confirmations, especially because we don't want to have committees involved in base rollups or in base pre-confirmations, because that kind of defeats the whole point of being base pre-confirmations, where we want our testers to be maximally dumb. And if we enforce them to keep timeliness, then it changes the core protocol itself, and it would change the definition of base pre-confirmations. So what I argue right now is that even though validators want to be nice, they are in this honesty equilibrium, where the incentive at block building time for validators is to choose the maximum highest paying builder or highest paying gateway, pre-confer, whatever that might be. And this is the short-term objective, because if they don't, then they get left out. Stake becomes centralized because some validators are minting more stake, and we just get centralization at the base layer protocol. But the validator incentive to vote in the long term doesn't have to be, and I'll present later how that might change. Oh, I think we're missing a slide. Oh, this is the right slide. The validator's dilemma right now is that in the short term, they want to delegate to builders who are maximally reward paying, but they might be doing it at the cost of censorship or bad ordering of transactions. But the validators can vote long-term for good builders who prove to them subjectively that they're not censorship resistant. Again, it's subjective, so we probably don't want to slash builders and big nodes for not following these commitments. But we do want to make the incentives that if they follow these commitments, they make more money, i.e. we can bring an equilibrium where builders want to be censorship resistant because they get rewarded for that. If we go one, yeah. So the proposal I have is appointed execution proposer. So by default, we have the current market structure where proposers, you can think of them as builders in execution tickets or execution auctions or EPBS. The builders are permissionless by default, similar to like how Mevus works. But there's a configurable minimum quorum, and the validators can appoint proposers by voting. For example, a validator can say like, hey, I want to vote for Beaver and Titan to be the in-protocol builders. And after some configurable quorum, for example, 75%, if 75% of the Ethereum validators vote for, just cast their votes, because the default would be that no one casts any vote, because that's how the protocol starts. Once 75% of the Ethereum validators cast their votes, those builders or big nodes become permissioned. The protocol only recognizes them, and then people would they're supported by the protocol to offer blocks to the validators. So the bidding strategy would be, yes, offer me the highest MEV or the highest proposer bid as well, but also show me that you will be censorship resistant. Show me that if you're a gateway, that you will release your pre-confirmations timely. And it's basically embedding trust in validators to make the right choice for us, the Ethereum protocol. And also by doing this simple mechanism in protocol to choose proposers, we also don't have to implement in protocol something that are like not tested out yet, which is execution tickets or EPBS or execution auctions. Where argue, well, we got PBS out of protocol and we saw what the upsides are and the downsides are, and then we went to EPBS, so we know exactly how the market plays out. But for execution tickets and auctions, we don't know how things play out. We don't know what the equilibria is. We don't know what the incentives of big nodes and small nodes are. So I think this is a easier in-protocol solution. And there's probably some flaws with this as well, which I touch on later. But I think research should maybe go in this direction. And this lets the market choose the market structure. If many validators think that, hey, execution tickets is the way I want to vote for my builder, then this is what will be the predominant on-chain solution, but out-of-protocol solution. Cool. So in general, AAPs keep you aligned because you can have a nuclear like a proliferation treaty where you can say like, hey, if the builders are being censorship, then I can vote for like some smaller set of permission builders, and i.e. builders incentivized. The threat is always hanging on their head that if they're being too very censoring, that the validators will eject them from the permission set. So what can AAPs bring to Ethereum? Timely provision for pre-confirmations. The builders can also offer, hey, make me the builder because I will store the blobs forever. One worry that I have is in 40 years, we look back and see only Google Cloud Storage has all of the blobs. We currently have no incentive structure, or maybe a minimum incentive structure for someone to hold all of the blobs for 50 years. Maybe something through APs can incentivize the subjective behavior out of protocol. It also allows to do experimentation on proposed election mechanisms like execution tickets, execution auctions, or whatever other articles out there regarding proposed election mechanisms. AAP concerns that need to be addressed, which are not fully fleshed out. So if you guys think this is interesting, please come talk to me after. Maybe you can find some solutions for this. For example, how many validators, how many builders/proposers can a validator vote for? Do they get a fixed amount of vote? Are the number of votes scaled with their stake weight? Questions like that. How should the proceeds from the AAP markets be shared amongst the validators? In the current MEF boost pipeline, you choose one, and that's your builder, and they pay directly to you. But if you choose many, what's the equivalent of MEF burn in this ecosystem? And also, how do you prevent proposers/builders from sibling the protocol, where you can just have one Titan saying, hey, I will not censor, but also title, I will have censor, and they kind of split the market, split the vote. So those are some concerns that need to be addressed. And in general, AAP stand to improve proposer alignment. That's the last meme I leave you with. If you have any questions, please go ahead with that.
I might have missed this point, but if proposers are more or less electing builders,
validators,
or validators are electing builders to in this permission set, how do you sort of, I guess, prevent there being any sort of like off-chain politics where builders are working with validators?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I guess it also applies to the current discussion on EPBS. How do you prevent MEF boost to still run and be maybe the more dominant choice even when you have EPBS? I think in how one way APs or appointed proposers gain over out-of-protocol mechanisms is the order flow. If everyone can see publicly that these are the appointed proposers/builders, then the order flow will also make its way towards them because you have higher probability of them winning, because more validators are delegating to them, and the validators, it can be enforced in protocol that the validators who voted for them have to pick from the white permission set, i.e. being appointed is a social signal to beyond the rest of the PBS pipeline that flow your orders here, and then you will get higher chance of your transaction landing in the next block. So yeah, again, it's not a reward and enforcement, but it's a out-of-protocol subjective movement to appoint these ones, and you have higher chances of making transactions land. You have higher chances of your transactions not being censored because the builders or proposers are publicly advertising that I will not do this. Yeah, so that's how I think it can play out. But there's probably some other research that needs to be done into maybe enforcing mechanisms.
Okay, thanks.
Hello, thank you for a nice talk. Just a question, like getting back to the question just asked that you answered. How have you thought about how to basically estimate the impact of a lot of exogenous factors that may influence the voting? So, for instance, about, I don't know, being censorship resistant. There may be, I really didn't look in the data, but there may be evidence that after all, being censorship resistant is not like economically more convenient. Maybe, I don't know, by non-censoring, a builder loses a little bit of money. At that point, the problem is, you know, a validator may still say, well, I'll vote for the guy that gives me the more money. So have you thought about how to reflect in protocol these kind of exogenous incentives that are not in the voting at the moment?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the slides, I'm not sure if the first one was, do you trust your validator? So do you trust them? But
No.
also the other argument is, in the short term, the incentive is, I agree, to go with the highest paying builder, irrespective of what they're doing, censoring, MEVing, sandwiching, whatever. But the long-term incentives for validators should also be that Ethereum as a protocol does better. So in the short term, until the quorum is reached for this appointed set, they can still keep choosing the malicious builder and vote for the permission set that they believe will bring the properties that they want in the protocol. And only after the quorum is reached, for example, let's say 75% of Ethereum validators have cast their vote, will does this permission set turn on. So I presented in a slide called the validator's dilemma, where in short term, the incentive is to go for the highest paying builder. But in the long term, if you trust your validator, if the validators are Ethereum aligned, then they will want to vote for builders or big nodes that's enhance the UX and keep the ethos of the Ethereum values.
But you could be in a tragedy of the commons situation where the effort to flip the equilibrium is too high. And so even if everyone knows that that's the good thing to do, no one has an incentive to do it locally. And so they never do in the long run, right?
Yeah, that's fully possible. For examples, I show that the validators in general have been making good decisions for us in the past, or at least the Ethereum community on crypto Twitter has been forcing them to make good decisions in the past. So I don't have any specific data on this, if that's what you're getting really at.
Yeah.
But they have shown good behavior. And if you trust your validator, then we can maybe entrust them with also choosing our builder/big nodes.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Cool. I guess you're fully aligned with my proposal, and I won't expect any EIP from all of you. Thank you.